Okay, perfect. Yep, thanks. Are we ready? Yeah. That was really enthusiastic.
Just wait. I'm saving all my enthusiasm for the show.
All right, you guys, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Surprised to see so many people here. Last session and all. So just some housekeeping items. The sign-up sheets are going around. There's one on each side. If you do need a CEU credit for another state, I have them up here, and I can fill one out for you after the session is complete. So just keep that in mind. So this presentation, we're going to kind of go over the structures division and kind of discuss some of our manuals and changes that are happening. So with this, like I said, structures division, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in bridge management, project delivery, and then again, the update and revisions on all of the manual items. So we tried to come up with a symbol or graphic here that kind of represents where we are in the structures division right now. So you can see there's 3 groups within the structures division, which is bridge management, structures design, and geotechnical design. And so we tried to put it in this circle, it represents that continuous cycle and how we plan, design, construct, and inspect. As you can see too, we have 2 manuals, or more or less 3 manuals. Each group has a manual. The bridge management manual talks about our inspection practices, planning and programming, and Josh will get more into the details of that. And within design, we now have the structures design and detailing manual, SDDM, and we're also working on updating the geotechnical manual of instruction now as well. So this really kind of will help go through the processes and requirements of each respective group. So starting with the whole planning and programming, our whole goal here is to develop and manage the needs based on the condition of the structures. It's very data-driven, and then sometimes, we work with the regions for capacity and some of their projects. So typically what happens in this is, within the planning and programming, we develop a scope and estimate, basically having that plan for every structure. So what we call it in our group is basically a scope and estimate. If you talk within the region, they use the term concept. So if we are working with them on a project, we would give them our scope and estimate. They put it into their concept report. And so that's how we function when we are relating to the regions on their projects. Otherwise, if it's a standalone bridge project, it still goes to the region, but we would just develop that scope and estimate for that project. So with that, obviously, once the planning and programming is done, it moves into design. Pretty straightforward, but it really moves into that whole project delivery phase at that point. And then through construction. Our whole goal within construction is that if you're working on a bridge project, that you follow that project, that design through construction. That's why we worked so hard with the PDN to actually get that phase where you can charge or have construction work on the construction side of it with submittals and just basically any question that came up during construction. The engineer of record, you're the one that knows that bridge. You're the best person to answer those questions. If you need help from the department, we will answer those questions as well, but we really do expect you to follow the project through construction. So at that point, construction is done, and now as an agency owner, we have to maintain that bridge for its life. So then we move into the inspection side, which moves back into bridge management. So we, we inspect bridges every 2 years. This is where we develop that data that then can move back into our planning and programming, so we're making the right decision for the bridge. So looking at kind of the manuals and guidance, I kind of talked about them briefly, but we have the Bridge Management Manual, Structures Design and Detailing, the Geotechnical Manual of Instruction. Again, we're working with the geotechs right now to update that document. So probably within a year, you'll see an update on that. We have the Structures Division QC QA procedures that we also maintain. And then within the Project Delivery Network, we maintain all the structures tasks within that. So if you ever have any questions, please feel free to call any one of us. And we're going to kind of go on how we would like things. If you want something updated and have recommendations for revisions, we're going to talk about that at the end of this. So, thanks.
How's the audio? Richie, you can hear me? You're good? Just give you a quick update on bridge management. We're looking at a lot of things like Carmen said, planning, programming, inspection, load rating, all of those different programs. I'll just run through a few of them quick. One of the things that we try to do is look at the inventory of bridges in a lot of different ways. That helps us with how we allocate funding, that helps us with a lot of the planning and the scoping that we do. One of the things that you can see, we are approaching 3,000 bridges. We're at 2,971, and this comes off of the cover of our annual bridge report. One takeaway you might take from this is go get a copy of that annual bridge report. There's going to be something in there that everybody is interested in. One of the main things is probably the entire preservation program and the rehab and replacement program. Everything that we know, every project for a 5-year outlook is listed in there. You don't have to scour through the STIP anymore. You can just, if you want to know everything that we're doing in terms of bridge programs, at least a snapshot in time from what we know, that's all listed in there. One of the things you know, on the far right, you can see the number of bridges we have in each region. It's kind of interesting if we look at this by square footage, it completely flip-flops Region 4 and Region 2. So we have a lot more square footage of bridge in Region 2, but the number is high in Region 4. A lot of you know that we got a lot more funding in the structures division now than what we've had previously. And a lot of that has to do with these big number of bridges that you see built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So we're trying to avoid replacing most of these bridges, and you're going to see why here in the next few slides. But almost every one of them, in fact, we would say every one of them needs some kind of treatment. So we're looking at a lot of rehabilitative treatments, a lot of preventive measures that we're going to put on these bridges to try to avoid replacing them. As you look at the entire inventory in Utah, this is the state inventory. You can see that there's not a huge percent right now that are 50 years older. It's 1 out of 5 has exceeded that 50-year, and we just assumed that they were designed to a 50-year service life. Back before LRFD kind of came into vogue, we assumed that there was a 50-year design. So you can see the very tail end of the inventory. These would be your replacement candidates without any kind of condition information. But as you begin to look at the inventory in terms of condition, you can see that we do not have 20% in poor condition. So even though 20% have exceeded their assumed design life, from a condition perspective, we're not there. We're much more fair and good, and so therefore we're looking at more. We don't have to replace these bridges. We can do something else. One of the ways we're trying to characterize that is by a health index. So we've charted deterioration and tried to make responsible thresholds for what's good and what's fair and what's poor, trying to roll up the deck condition, the superstructure condition, and the substructure condition. And so what you see here is every bridge built by decade going back, is it good, fair, or poor? Contrast that with just looking at it from an age perspective, And you can see that even a lot of our older bridges still are in pretty good shape. Most of what you see in the yellow, those are definitely bridges we have our eye on. They're ones that you'll see on the program. Some may rise up to a deck replacement, but a lot of them need treatments on the deck. The locally owned system is in a little worse shape. You see a lot more yellow. We're probably okay with that. They don't see near the number of traffic that we see on the state side. They also don't have the same funding, but overall it's still in pretty good shape. Just a quick word on the programming. This is where we're at, and you can see that we've kept the replacement rehab program between 15 and 20 million. We're not infusing a ton of money into that program. But when you look at preservation, 2015, 3.5. In 2019, we've got 30 million in that. Hopefully that makes sense based on the condition charts that I just showed you. We have a lot of fair and good condition bridges, so our main drivers right now are keeping those bridges good and fair. Just a quick update on the bridge programs. We've kind of touched on the replacement rehab program, so that should be pretty straightforward. If the bridge is poor, we're going to target that for either a deck replacement or a full bridge replacement. Within that, we've got the bridge inspection program and the load rating program. We use both of these parameters to try to identify the worst bridges in terms of condition across the inventory. So the health index is built based on the condition information coming out of our inspection program. We combine that with its load carrying capacity, and that's how we create the health index. Within the bridge preservation program, we've begun a bridge maintenance program. This is brand new this year. It's going to be at least $500,000 a year that we are just going to put to immediately responding to doing potholes correctly, fixing overlay systems, maybe even fixing drainage systems, things that make a big impact on the bridge that we don't want to wait 5 years to get to. We want to get to them as soon as they happen. The scour program, there's also, if you look at the annual bridge report, you'll see we've listed out all of the scour critical bridges. We're going to eliminate over the next few years all of our scour critical bridges on the state system. That's only about a dozen bridges right now, and we're just going to provide the mitigation that we need to remove those from the scour critical list. And then a program that we need to continue to have money in, but it's not necessarily, we're not wanting bridges to get hit, but we have an emergency program that is able to respond to collisions, natural disasters if they happen, those kind of things. In early 2014, we released the Bridge Management Manual, and it's 7 chapters long. Hopefully you've had a chance to at least look at some parts of it, whether you're in design, inspection, load rating, if you're a local government. There's a lot of good information in here. Let me just go through the chapters quickly. The chapter 1 is administration. A lot of what Carmen went over at the beginning of this presentation and just kind of how we're organized, how we do business is listed out there. If you're curious about the nuts and bolts of how we do planning and programming, that's all kind of gone through in pretty good detail in chapter 2. And then if you're part of the bridge inspection program, we have a comprehensive overview of the entire program, exactly what's needed, exactly what we do, every report that we do, every procedure that we follow. It's all listed in there. And likewise for load rating, it's chapter 4. I'd encourage you to look at chapter 5 if you haven't already, because what that is it's our emergency response plan, and that addresses the minor events like a flood or a landslide or something along those lines, but it also talks about how we would respond to a major earthquake. And, that gets a lot of publicity. That's in the news, that we're on the Wasatch Fault. It's a highly urbanized area, very close to a fault. How would we respond to that? Almost everybody in this room is likely going to be involved in that. So it would be good to maybe take a look at that beforehand and have an idea of the role that you might play. And then we talked about bridge maintenance. That's listed out in our chapter 6. And we've set aside this entire Chapter 7 to help our local partners just understand bridge terminology, bridge programs, how we carry out our bridge inspection program, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's all I have for the update on bridge management, and then save questions for the end.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the project delivery side. So within project delivery, we have the structures design, the geotechnical design, and construction support, which Carmen talked about. Within the design, it includes whether it's a new or replacement structure. We also do maintenance projects to support maintenance, whether it's a temporary or a permanent fix, preservation, rehabilitation, and permit projects. As Carmen mentioned, one thing that we're really trying to hone in on and make sure everyone's aware is the role of the engineer of record during construction, that it's not to drop off as soon as you advertise, that role continues all the way through physical completion of the project. Talk a little bit about the SDDM, which was released earlier this year. Hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to use it in some respect. As we emphasized before, the SDDM is not just the chapters. It includes the checklists and the drawings. And the drawings consist of the working standards, the structures design drawings, and the sample sheets. It also includes design memorandum and some templates, which are all located on the website. And the SDDM defines the requirements for all structural design. I'm going to go through some of the chapters now. So our first 6 chapters are mainly administrative, talking about procedures, policies, what the reports look like, the content of the reports, how to put a plan set together, including the specs and the drawings and the estimate, what the roles and responsibilities are, what needs to be there. Chapter 5 is dedicated to design quality, which complements the structure's QC/QA procedures. And then Chapter 6 gives the definition for construction support and what those roles are. The remaining chapters are all the technical chapters. It starts with the preliminary design, and then it moves through all the different parts of the bridge. I'm not going to list all these chapters, but it's pretty obvious from the titles what's in it. Chapter 21 is probably the one that will receive the most attention moving forward. As you can see from what Josh and Carmen were saying, our preservation program is going to get a lot of funding. We're going to put a lot of effort on those programs. So as we do that and as we develop the drawings that associate with that, we'll make sure that the Chapter 21 is in line with what our requirements are to help give guidance. So there are checklists. For the most part, the checklists are tools for you for both design and construction. So there's some design checklists, how to prepare the plans, what needs to go on them, and for shop drawing reviews. The only checklist that is a required deliverable right now is the S&L checklist. So I'm going to turn it over to Hugh to talk in specifics about some of the drawings.
So I'm just going to talk about what we've seen so far and how the drawings are being used and successes. Several of the projects I've been involved in, a couple of the teams have really embraced the manual and really embraced all the checklists. The Hillfield Road Design Build team, they did a great job embracing that manual and going through the checklist. And as a reviewer, it was very useful for me to just be able to click through the checklist. It's really, we're trying to make your job We're trying to make your job easier. One of the sheets we've seen done wrong several times is this steel design sheet, and this is a working standard where we have the items that we want changed, with blue notes. Several groups have taken this and tried to put all the steel plate information on this sheet, and what's happened when we try to do that, we lose information that's on the sheet. And then not everything that should be with the plate gets on there. So what we really want you as designers to do is to work with us. And when you see things that you would like to change, let us know, and then we can give you some directions on how to change the sheets. And so what's happened is this sheet's been tried to combine with this, plate sheet. And really, we want these separate. UDOT has been using this type of girder sheet since the very beginning. I know my first steel project for UDOT, I did the same thing. I took this sheet and I tried to put all my plate information on it, and Boyd called me in and said, yeah, we want that off. We want the separate sheet. And there's a lot of benefits to that. It helps the fabricator see all the details. We know they're all there. So please don't change things that aren't marked in blue unless you've talked to us and coordinated with us. We are contemplating making a couple of these SS sheets, WS sheets, even though everything on this sheet would be changed. But the format is from NSBA. They've laid everything out there. You have the Sharpie marks all the way already on there, the tension flanges, the length of that. There's a lot of information that when we start moving this to that other sheet, it gets missed and forgotten. And so we are contemplating changing this to a WS sheet. Same for the cross frame sheets. This one specifically has the graffiti plate, which really should be a WS sheet since it should never change. But the cross frames, we really want the designers to pick what's best for their bridge, so we're a little reluctant to make this one a WS sheet. With same kind of issues with the splice plate sheet. We're contemplating making this a WS sheet. We saw a few splices come through, and it's like you don't quite have all the information on there, or it's more difficult to read than we're used to seeing. These SS sheets, they don't represent requirements, but they do represent how we do want to see the information presented. And so that's why we're looking at some of these ones where we feel very strongly about how the information should be presented. We're probably going to convert them to WS sheets. Now this is a SD sheet for weathering steel details, and this one can go either way. The SD sheets do show requirements that we have to show on the sheets. I can't remember why we ended up doing this in an SD sheet and not a WS sheet, and I think it's really more because these details don't necessarily have to be a standalone sheet. We could combine them with other sheets. Most of the WS sheets are set up such that they are standalone sheets. One of the changes that's going to be coming forward is that we're probably going to require these plates, the drip plates on every girder as opposed to just the exterior girders. This is a project that was just completed. The weathering steel guys, they talk about protecting the bends during construction to avoid this kind of staining. And it's really not that bad, but that was just from one rainstorm during construction. And you can see that the exterior girder on the exterior side where we had the drip plate, it did stop all the staining. So we will probably just have to provide that detail on every girder. This is just showing some of the standard cross frames. It has some guidance on there. And this links back to that first sheet. We've had some questions on whether the diaphragms stiffeners should be skewed. How do we detail them? We want you to detail them exactly as shown on here. If the skew's less than 20 degrees, the diaphragm stiffeners are skewed, but we let the fabricator change it to a 90-degree and a bent plate if he wants. But we still want you to detail it with the skewed stiffeners if the skew is less than 20 degrees. I had a lot of questions after last year. People asked me, did you go to Panelini's presentation? Did you see what he said about the ductility of those? And I had met with him before he published his final report. And he had, he's like, oh, Hugh, the drift ratios are great, the energy dissipation's great, the relative stiffness is great, everything looks the same. And he hadn't published the report. And so recently we got a report from the University of Nevada, Reno, and it said, don't ever use this detail. And UDOT is still supporting using this detail. One of the things when we went back and looked back at Panelini's research, the way he defined the ductility capacity, was flawed when we look at it from how we design a bridge. And what it was is that he was reading the yield displacement based on the test alone. And so that yield displacement, based on the test, where they were kind of arbitrarily picking a point off the curve, was 2 to 3 times what you would calculate the yield displacement to be. And so when he had ductilities of 3 and 4, if you actually did a calculated yield, you would see that the ductilities were, 9, 10, much higher. And so we still aren't concerned about it. We've asked Dr. Panelese to kind of look back at his research, kind of take a look back at how that yield displacement is defined and try to correct that. And then there was one of his tests too was a little misleading because they pushed the bridge 1.5 inches before they ever started to recording, and that one looked really bad because he was picking that yield stress off of a point that had already yielded once. And so it made it look a lot softer than it normally would have been. And so he's going to look into that. That'll probably happen in the next 3 months or so. But we do hope to address that. So we still don't have concerns with this, but at least now we understand why I got all the questions last year. One of the problems we've seen is our location plans. We've struggled to get good location plans. This is actually a location plan that UDOT put out with the Hillfield Road set. It's really doesn't tell us anything about where the bridge is. We really want a location plan that kind of gives somebody so they can just take a look and see where the bridge is and place it. And this is really just, who knows where that bridge is. And so this is another location plan that UDOT did for a rehab set. And so both these don't really, that other one was for just a design build preliminary set. Didn't really quite have all the information we want on there anyway. But it was still that mini-me type of thing, whereas really what we're looking for is more of these line-style drawings that physically, locate it. Like you can see where 215 is, you can see where I-15, you really know where the bridges are that they're talking about. There are going to be some updates coming up. We've got Cody working on expansion joints and the rehab drawings. That's probably going to be the biggest change coming forward. We're working on the box culverts and retaining walls, some standard sheets for that. David's working on the box culvert. We've kind of hit a snag with the software. He's working with them to get the bugs out, and hopefully we'll get it done next week, pretty soon. We have the technical writer. He's going to be signing a new contract pretty soon to do the updates on the manual. Most of the text updates are fairly small, just minor edits. This is what you guys can really help us with. If you see things in there that you're concerned about, that you want changed, or just flat out errors, let us know. Same with all the drawings. There will be more modifications on the drawings than in the written manual. There are forms out there that we'd like you to fill out when you do identify areas that need to be changed, and just submit those to Cheryl. This is just a little bit about how it's going to be tracked. So change the chapters. There'll be so far like we've been tracking, we've been marking the changes so you can find a document that shows exactly what was changed on the WS sheets. The chapters and the checklist will have the same type of tracking. We're going to send out messages when stuff is changed, and then the red lines will be posted. And then there's also a big effort to do the 2017 specifications. And we're trying to be more consistent with linking that stuff back to the drawings and working through all the issues. And we're trying to get all of the spec language that we've had on our plan sheets in the past in the specs. And so we don't have language on the plan sheet that's slightly different than what's in the specification, and then the contractor's got a conflict there in what he wants to do. So we're trying to pull all of those type of spec notes off the plans and make sure our specs are correct. That's about all I have. Any questions for the group?
Does anybody have any questions? Do you want to answer that, Jeff?
When MAP 21 became the law of the land, sufficiency rating was eliminated. So what MAP 21 requires is that every state have an asset management plan. That asset management plan has to be data-driven, risk-based, all those good things. So that's what we have. The health index helps drive that. Sufficiency rating does not. Technically, it does not. No. Okay, Kate asked if the Joint Highway Committee, there's 4 different systems that we look at bridges. There's the National Highway System, there's the state system, there's the federal aid system, and then there's the local non-federal aid system. So the Joint Highway Committee allocates funding for the local non-federal aid bridges. That always has come back to a policy that UDOT has had on the books that always used to say sufficiency rating of 50 and 80. That's no longer the case, and MAP 21 made it clear that as long as there's an asset management in place that is data-driven and risk-based across the entire inventory, that money can be allocated to preservation, rehab, and replacement. The 50 and the 80 are no longer in vogue. Now, I would still tell a local, absent any other good information that you have, you might start there. You might start with sufficiency rating. Does that help, Cade? You got it? Steve, if I heard you correctly, you said if they don't have an asset management plan, then they would still go back to the 50 and 80? There's no requirement on the books to use 50 and 80. It's just a rule of thumb. It's previous practice, and it's something that is a starting point. But if you've got a local owner, they've got 12 bridges, they're probably not going to be very sophisticated in their asset management plan. If they look at sufficiency rating and it's 55, they're no longer constrained to say, we can't replace that because it's 55.
Anybody have any other questions? Thanks for coming.